I got it. I know you're teasing me, but I do sound awful today. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back live with the Louis B. Free Radio Show, Brain Food from the Heartland. I'm going to do this so I don't have to stop at the top of the hour. Louis B. Free Radio Show, Brain Food from the Heartland is copyright B. Free Radio Limited, 2022, produced by the lovely Ms. Money Face in cooperation with White Rabbit Productions. The Louis B. Free Radio Show, Brain Food from the Heartland, is an adult-oriented show intended for and only for a mature adult audience. Listener discretion is strongly advised. And I am absolutely thrilled, Johanna, to have you on the show today. And I want to say publicly, thank you for bearing with me. Will you introduce yourself? May I say about the breasts?
Sure.
So I messed up the scheduling, and I'm freaking out, absolutely freaking out, folks. You know how much I've been looking forward to talking with Johanna, and she said, just, it's okay. Just take three deep breaths. It was lovely. Honestly, you're lovely. Tell us about yourself, please.
Sure. And I first want to start off by saying I love independent radio. There's not enough of it left in this continent. So I am really happy to be here.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I am lisping today. By the way, I am lisping today, folks. I'm in the middle of some dental work, so you're going to hear it. It's very obvious. Go ahead, Johanna.
Sure. My name is Johanna Lunn. I am an independent filmmaker and media maker living in Halifax, Nova Scotia, hugging the great North Atlantic.
Gotta be beautiful, beautiful there, right?
Oh, it's magnificent. Yeah. It's really a one of those places on this great continent of ours that doesn't have a whole lot of human foot traffic. So it's wild. It is truly wild.
It's got to be beautiful. So I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Rugged.
A little bit rugged. A little bit more about you and your background.
Well, I've been in the media business for 35 years or so, working everything from launching film festivals to working in mainstream broadcasting for a whole bunch of years, doing TV series and documentaries and things like that, launching the independent film channel in Canada.
Wow.
And then, eventually retiring from that way too soon to start my own company and work on projects that I really had a lot of passion for. And so from that, Century East Media was born, and the When You Die project, which is we've been working on in between other projects now for 8 years.
Wow. What attracted you to it? What got you to the When You Die project?
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of those things that has always been in the back of my mind as a media maker, but really I come to the subject because at a young age, I had a number of significant deaths in my life. My mother died unexpectedly, and followed shortly after that by my closest friend, who was like a sister to me, followed shortly after that by a car accident where a pedestrian died in my arms. And so those three deaths happened within less than a 3-year period, starting when I was 19, and it completely blew me out of the water in terms of like the grief scale was off the charts. And it was at a time when death was so taboo. If you had a loss, it was kind of like being sent out for exile. Like, we can't be around you because we have no idea how to be with you. Don't know what to say to you. Just could you get over it so we could get back to you again? That kind of thing. And of course, as someone who's young and trying to sort of navigate the 20s and who am I and what am I going to do, this was really, really devastating. It took me years really to process all of that, and very much on my own. So I think when I got into, actually one of my first jobs out of college was working as a researcher on a project we were pitching to PBS for death and dying in the context of community. And I had a chance as a young researcher to talk to a lot of the early death pioneers. So this is just really coming up to the AIDS crisis, where hospice was becoming a thing. And so, I had a chance to really talk to a lot of amazing people. We pitched an amazing project. PBS was blown away, but they said, it's really too taboo. We can't do this now.
Wow.
So that has stuck in my head for my entire career, and there have been many beautiful documentaries about individuals at the end of their life that have been moving and helpful in so many ways, but there's not been what I would say is a big look at death and dying from the point of view of we need to talk about these things. Even if you're not faced with a diagnosis, death is part of life. 100%, we're all going to die. So what do you think about that? What does it mean to be human? Really, what is it? If we've got a limited shelf life, what does that mean about our humanity? So when I was kind of at the point of, well, what's my next project going to be? It was like, well, of course it has to be this one, And I thought it was just going to be a one-off documentary, and it turned into a huge website where I could start putting a lot of the resources that I was finding in my research and dabbling in podcasts. And now there's a trilogy and probably an epilogue after that.
Wow.
So yeah, the first film is out and the second film is coming in the fall.
Oh, wonderful. That's wonderful. You had just, I've got so many questions just about what we were talking about. A funny one, I think, if you don't mind. When you say limited shelf life, I was, and this was a few years ago, I was looking at the bottom of my foot, stretching, looking at the bottom of my foot. My wife said, what's wrong? What are you looking for? And I said, I'm looking for my expiration date. As a joke. That wasn't what I was doing. Maybe I was, I don't know. It was a few years ago. You know how wacky I am. When you said isolated, and you write isolated, you felt ghost-like.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind telling me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, I guess I have to really say the obvious thing is that, as a society, we are terrified of death. We have done everything possible, up until I would say the COVID crisis, but even with that, we've done everything possible to push death as far away as possible. And, I'll say that my grandmother, that part of the family came to the US in the late 1800s. So there was a family homestead in Pennsylvania. And they started a little forge and built the family homestead. And it had a little door in the parlor near the floor. And as a kid visiting my grandmother, because she was the second generation in the homestead, it never occurred to me, like I saw that door and I guess I thought, oh, that's where they bring the wood in, right? And then it wasn't until I was, maybe 12 or 13, I realized, well, there's not a fireplace. Like, what is
so
that?
where are they bringing the wood in for if there's no fireplace?
And so I asked her and she said, oh, that's where the dead bodies go out of the house feet first. And it's in the parlor because everyone in that family, my grandmother included, was born in that house. Well, not everyone, but a lot of them were born in that house. It was a big family. And a lot of them died in that house. And so kind of the trajectory was, you might be sick. And so you're still in your bedroom upstairs. And as you get weaker, then you're on the sofa in the parlor. And then when you're dead, you move on to the library table in the parlor. And then you go out the little door in the parlor. So it was part of life because babies were born there. So everybody understood the language of both like babies gestating and when it would be time. Like you could see these, how a woman is moving towards birth, just like they could see how each human was moving towards death. They knew the language of death. So we have, after World War II, Better Homes and Gardens renamed the parlor the living room. And the funeral industry really started to take off. So really at that point, it was like, no more bodies in the house, get them out, get them out. You have babies in hospitals, and then as we know, slowly midwives became, really fringe and maligned in ways that really should never have happened. So we've done those. Birth and death got really pushed, marginalized away. Also this idea that women shouldn't breastfeed because we have science now, right? We have something better than breast milk. So all of that was a way of pushing a huge, the most important passages of a human's life out of society. And we are most afraid of what we don't know. And so now we really don't know about death, and the prospect of it all is really scary. And whether we were death literate or not, when someone dies, it's shocking. But if you're already afraid of death and someone dies, the stress meter is off the chart. We have no concept in our little brains for what that's about. So it was kind of long-winded.
No, it's not long-winded. Again, and I hope you don't mind my style, I'll do air quotes, but people need to watch the film. And I'm not saying should watch. I'm not saying might be interested in. I'm saying very directly, this film is for everyone. Maybe not really young people, but watch it and you be the judge of it. But every adult, I would urge you to watch this film. And again, when you watch the film, you will understand the importance of it. And I dare say it'll blow your mind. It will open your mind, I should say. Also, it will open your mind. And it's really, really important to watch the film in the realm of death and dreaming. And again, when you came together, you brought together some amazing experts and stories, which are absolutely before I forget, if you don't mind, very quickly, a friend of my wife's was, and mine, but more a friend of hers, was dying a few years back, and told her of an experience he had. Now, this is not a religious guy. This is not even a spiritual guy. And he talked about when he was in the hospital, how he was floating above the bed and he could hear what was being said and saying. And then when I saw that, of course, in your film, in the realm of death and dreaming, it brought back that. I remember also earlier this year, a friend of mine's mom, I come very close with her, died in her 90s. And she would say there were other people in the room very close to her death, and other people, they were there, the nurse, whatever, was visiting, or if someone visiting would say, no, I don't want to say her name. No, it's just, Louis and, and when I had the opportunity to tell her, I said, I know they're here. I know they're here. Don't let people tell you that they're not. And when I watched the film, it brought back a lot of those memories. And she'd look at me and hold my hand and smile. It's important to not discount what people say they're seeing when they're close to death, correct?
Absolutely. So I'm going to back up just a little bit to say
Please.
that in the realm of death and dreaming, it explores that big question of, does consciousness continue after death? Which I think is, for me, it's a way into exploring part of that big question of what it is to be human, right? So I had a great opportunity to talk to a lot of people who have spent their careers working at the end of life or exploring more scientifically, consciousness and that big unanswerable question, what happens? Does consciousness continue? And in the course of that, all of these stories around near-death experiences, deathbed visitations, all the stuff that we would, I've actually called this the sexy side of death, because it's a little on the so-called woo-woo side, but it's also, when you start really digging into it, you realize that as a person, I use a very limited amount of my senses, and I often use this example of going out into the woods, which I do with my dog, Gracie, my chocolate lab.
Oh,
And it's like, when she gets out in the woods, she comes alive. She is hearing things that I can't hear.
smelling.
She is
I'm sorry.
seeing things, because she's got different set of sensory
Yeah.
perceptions, smelling the whole
Yeah.
thing. And one time a big storm was coming in off the Atlantic, and we're in a harbor, and she just turned her face right into the wind and went breathing in. And I thought, I'll try it. Why not?
If Gracie's doing it, I'm doing it.
Wind, and I smelled, and it was like, you could smell something far away. Like the wind was carrying smells that are not normally hanging around on the coast. And I was like, oh, wow. And she's smelling even more than what I'm smelling. And I realized we don't use our senses, just the ones we normally have, are more sensitive than we realize. When people have a premonition, the classic one, and this happened to a friend of mine, she just had this, she was supposed to fly, and she had this very strong feeling that she should not get on that plane. She didn't, and the plane crashed. And that's a big, oh, wow. But we have little ones all the time. Like, like, oh, what would be, I have them all the time. Things like, oh, don't buy this fruit, and it's like, yeah, but I like mangoes. I get it. And it looks like it's fine, but it's rotten.
It's rotten. I love
like
mangoes
a really
also.
ordinary little thing. But I kind of knew it in that moment at the grocery store, but it's like, it's a mango.
You didn't fall. Yeah. I've
didn't go
done that
it.
many. Yeah. I thought, I'm not sure about this. And then you get it home and you open it. It's like, I wasn't sure and I should have bought it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So in the film, I think, when we're dying, and one way, Dr. Anne-Marie Chasson, who teaches at the Andrew Weil School of Integrative Medicine at Tucson University, and she was also for many years a hospice doctor. And the way she described it to me, she said, when people...
Oh, please don't freeze up. I'm hopeful that this will reset because Johanna has frozen up. Hopefully soon. Oh, no, maybe not. There you are.
Sorry. Okay.
No, I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, I don't either. I was hoping, I thought, oh, now this, I'm late, I'm lisping, and now, and you've been so gracious, and now freeze up. Go ahead.
Okay, so consciousness is expanding out as we're dying. And so the level of sensitivity that a person who's dying has expands. And so it's almost like a crack in the universe, you might think. And so the idea that a dead relative might come to offer comfort in the final, days and hours of your life, to say, hey, it's okay, I got your back, we're here, or whatever, whatever that is. And we could debate whether that's a hallucination or whether it's real or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's comforting for the person who's experiencing it. So of course, as a caregiver and someone who's there to support your loved one, You don't go, oh, grandma,
Yeah.
Uncle so-and-so has been dead forever. You can't talk to him.
Yeah.
Don't say that. Say, isn't it wonderful?
Yeah.
What did he say?
Yeah.
Like be validate. End of life is not the time to settle scores, at least not those last days and hours. That's a whole nother saying goodbye. The second film, we talk a lot more about the opportunities to heal, when you have a diagnosis or you're moving towards the end of your life or you're planning for the end of your life. There's a lot of healing opportunity. But in those final days, couple weeks, days, hours, this is when we validate and do nothing but love. And when you open yourself to that love, to the person who's dying, and I'll give my father as an example, we didn't have the best relationship, and I'm being kind, but at his end of life, there was so much love present in that room. And without any words, there was a lot of healing in and of itself. So I could freely just drop my stuff and know this is my dad and he's wasting away and this is the end. And I love you anyway, and that just was incredible, just incredible. And it's not always easy because as humans, we have all kinds of fraught relationships.
Sure.
And that's a whole nother thing that, we get into in other films too. It's you can validate your own, I didn't like him very much, you could, but in that deathbed room,
Yeah.
this is where if you're going to be there, then you have to validate their experience. And the gift that you get back is enormous because you're starting to sense the this whole aspect of being human that we don't in our very materialistic world exercise very much. And yet we have access to it.
Johanna, I agree with you. I had issues with my father also. And like you say, I think it's very powerful. If you're going to be there for the right reason.
Right.
Don't settle scores. Don't be there to, don't bring that energy into that room when someone doesn't need it. It's not right. And again, I'm saying you've got to see the film In the Realm of Death and Dreaming, and we've got links up, or just go directly to whenyouDie.org, whenyouDie.org. Johanna, if you don't mind, I'll share another quick experience. There was a lawyer in Cleveland that he was the president of the bar, and he took a pro bono case. And I'm not going to get into the area regional people know what I'm talking about. A young girl that had shot her father for, I'm going to say, all the right reasons. And I was blown away by this lawyer, this really, should I say, popular, really experienced, really knowledgeable lawyer to take it pro bono. So I asked him if he would come in and talk with me about it. Bottom line, he did. And he told me about an experience that he had. And part of his, one of his arms doesn't work anymore. He had spinal injury. He had a motorcycle many years ago and got into a horrible accident, and told me about how he could hear the EMT saying he's bleeding out. And then he saw himself floating up. And I'm saying this because the film brought back reminded me of so many experiences or people I've spoken with about. And he saw his grandfather, and I can't remember the nickname he called him, and he said, "It's not your time yet. You've got to go back down." And I saw that in the film, In the Realm of Death and Dreaming. And it's just, and he said, it's attorney Ian Friedman. He said, "I don't fear death anymore, Louis. I don't fear death." And it's beautiful when people will share that, because I think it's comforting to the rest of us.
Absolutely. That's a great story.
Beautiful. Yeah.
It really is. And the thing about near-death experiences is that you don't have to be on the operating table bleeding out to have a near-death experience. And this is such an interesting thing to me. It was a NASA experiment. I've got to go find this and put it on our website, but I read about it some time ago, where they put a lot of, elite, like NFL athletes in those zero G gravity
okay.
rooms, but they spun them around first, almost like one of the, so that they're experiencing the takeoff of a spaceship where the G force is really intense.
Okay.
And something like 2/3 of them had out of body experiences.
Wow. That's interesting. And like you say, you don't need to be.
Yeah. And
you don't need to be on an operating table to have the experience.
No, Dr. Fennick, Peter Fennick, who I did interview and is in the film, and who's a real pioneer in researching near-death experiences. He said that even extreme trauma can cause that.
That's really interesting. And you had a variety of people. I don't know how you found them and brought them all together on this really incredible film in the realm of death and dreaming. You had a death doula, that Jill Shock was fascinating. I mean, they all, it's interesting when I finished watching the film, I thought, well, everyone, there wasn't like, no, they didn't need to put, who am I to judge, right? They didn't need to put that person. I've seen films like that. It's like, where does that fit in? Not being overly critical. I don't say it to a filmmaker or anybody, but it's in my head. I think everyone, they were all great except, and I don't like thinking like that, but they just all had such great information or great experience to share. How did you find these people, Johanna?
As a filmmaker, I get asked that, not just for this film, but other films. And I have to say, yeah, you do research, you make your lists, you drill down, you have a lot of pre-interview conversations, blah, 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 blah. But honestly, sometimes they're just practically given to you. Like a friend will say, and this happened to me with my film about forgiveness, Stories for Our Time. And this was a friend of mine was visiting London, England. He was on the tube, the subway, and picked up a newspaper that was left. And there was an article about a woman who was the vicar of Bristol Cathedral, whose daughter was killed in the London Underground bombings. Oh. And she refused to forgive. And so she was stepping down, because forgiveness is at the heart of Eucharist or communion. So, and he just came home with the paper and said, you've got to meet this lady. So, and I did, and she was amazing, amazing human being. And so in the realm of death and dreaming, we opened with Ellie Claire Hart, who's this beautiful woman, lives outside of San Francisco, has an incredible near-death story. And that was really another person who just said, hey, I know this person, blah, blah, blah. And I looked her up, and she is not a public person. She wouldn't have newspaper articles written about her, but she was a quiet, powerful, healing person. Very, very, she's a PhD and blah, blah, blah. She's very, all my people had PhDs. It was crazy if they weren't medical doctors. They're all highly credible people, but they're also very grounded and earthy and accessible people. So how did we find them? I don't know. There's always a little funny, I always find them in a funny little,
kind of meant to be, you feel?
I think so. Yeah. I think so. There's always a little magic in putting films together. I think any storyteller would say that, that it came to me. It wasn't my, I didn't do it.
Well, you tracked somehow.
Yeah.
Forgiveness. Where do we find the film Forgiveness?
Oh, let's see. Forgiveness, Stories for Our Time. It's streaming for free on the National Film Board of Canada's website.
Okay. Sorry, I'm writing quickly. I can get it from the audio later. But again, I'm talking with Johanna Lunn, talking about a film that everyone needs to see in the realm of death and dreaming. It's whenyouDie.org, whenyouDie.org. And I think another thing, Johanna, that reminded me of when I was talking with someone close to me about death, about mine. And this person said, I don't want to talk about it. And my response was, I need to. I don't want this to be hurtful to you, but it's a reality. And I need to express some things to you. I had a friend that I hadn't seen in decades and ended up seeing him when he came back to town. His daughter had died, and he contacted me about his daughter dying, and he said, we need to get together. Let's not wait till it's too late. In other words, one of us, because we're both well into our senior years. And that hit me. Don't wait till it's too late. And that was how I felt about expressing this. If I, like you say, we're all going to die. I think the film starts out with every living thing on earth is going to die. And people don't want to talk about it, but those conversations are extremely important, and for the person expressing them and for those that they want to hear it. Correct?
Oh gosh, Lee, absolutely. That's 100% the case. And I think the reason I wanted to start with a film about consciousness is because what we think about what happens when we die helps us decide what do we want at the end of our life, right? And so, I do believe that consciousness continues. And so I do believe that the deathbed is a very important space. And I want to have a space where it's protected, that it's a loving space, that, God, please don't play Stairway to Heaven while I'm dying, like
not that.
There's certain like little rules I'd like to set up around, if I have the good fortune of dying a natural death, because we don't all, but if I do, I really want to think about, the ground rules of what I want to have happen there. And also the quality of life is more important to me than the quantity of life. So having those conversations with my daughter, with my brothers, with my husband, at first it's like, oh, we don't want to talk about that stuff. And I'm like, I need you to promise me these things I believe in. Okay. This, you got to go there. And, then you can really start playing with it. When you get people over that fear, then it can be more like, oh, so is that what we put on your grave? Or you can start having some fun, right? And it's not a scary thing. And then it's actually a great kindness, because then people know what you want. All the big decisions are made. And so it can just be about entering a grief journey together. I'm going to be grieving as I die because I don't really want to leave, right? I love it here. Yeah. And they'll be entering grief because they don't want me to go, but together we can concentrate on that beautiful, powerful emotion, and not, no, she wasn't a donor, an organ donor. Yes, she was an organ donor. And I've seen that. I have seen two sisters fight over what they thought their father wanted in the middle of a hospital. They'd both been at a high school prom, and they had little skimpy dresses on and sheets wrapped around them and their mascara going down their faces, fighting. It's like, you don't want that.
No, you don't want that.
Really
you don't want that. I'm sorry for telling you all my stories, but very quickly, my father had expressed to me, and he died 30 years ago. Yeah, let me do the math in my head. I'm not good at math in my head. 30 years ago. And he had expressed to me that he wanted to be cremated. Never expressed it, never said anything to my mom. And our tradition varies very quickly. It was no time for me to approach her and say, no, he told, it just, had he expressed it to her, then everything would be fine. And I don't want to say that 30 years later, I feel guilty. died, and whether he was buried or cremated, but he never wrote it down, anything. And that's, again, another reason that I express my wishes to family. They need to know, and you need to have that conversation. As difficult as someone may say it is hearing it, like you were saying, and I was saying earlier, I need to talk about it. I need to express this to you now. And that, I won't forget that, about her expressing it to me and not my mom. And again,
Yeah.
of course, I'm not going to approach my mom 24 hours later or 12 hours later after they were, I don't know, married for 50 plus years. That by the way, Dad told me he wanted to be cremated. So, it's important to have these conversations. And I know that if you watch the film In the Realm of Death and Dreaming, that's a great way to bring it up and out, and watch it with a loved one, watch it with a relative, watch it with people. And and the other thing I just want to say very briefly is I always say very briefly that I'm not, the soundtrack I thought was, it came to me, it's like, the background soundtrack, right, was beautiful. And it kind of floated you through the film, which I absolutely loved. And I know you've got to go. I want to thank you for the work that you do and how vitally important it is for all of us. I am eager to see the next film, and hopefully you'll come back on with my wackiness when it comes out. But again, you can go to the website. We've got links up at wfmj.com, louisfreeshow.com, louisbfree.com, all the, well, the young techies do be available on the podcast and YouTube video in a little bit. And I want to thank you, Johanna Lunn, so very much for doing the gig with me, and your patience with me and your graciousness with me. Thank you. I'm honored.
You're very welcome. I'm very happy to meet you, and I know we'll talk about the next one.
I thank you for that. Thank you for that so very much. Folks, I want to tell you a little bit more about the film and where you can find it at the website. It's very, very easy to find at the website. We've got all of those links up at